The lawyer's words echoed in the sterile conference room like a death sentence. "I'm sorry, Elena, but your name appears nowhere in your grandfather's final will and testament." I watched from the corner chair as my cousins Tyler and Sophia exchanged satisfied glances across the polished oak table. 28 years of Sunday dinners, countless hours mixing concrete and learning the family trade, and Papa Miguel had apparently forgotten I existed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Tyler leaned back in his leather chair, adjusting his expensive watch with theatrical precision. "Well, abuela always said Papa Miguel valued loyalty above everything else." His eyes found mine with calculated cruelty. Guess we know where that leaves people who abandon the family business for tree hugging in Oregon. The conference room at Henderson Associates had witnessed countless family disputes, but this felt different. This was surgical, clean, deliberate. Papa Miguel's empire, Rodriguez Construction and Landscaping, built from a single pickup truck 40 years ago, was being carved up like Sunday roast, and I wasn't even offered table scraps. But sitting there, watching my inheritance evaporate, I remembered something Tyler had forgotten. Papa Miguel never did anything without purpose, and he never, ever forgot a birthday. The drive from Portland to Bakersfield usually took me 8 hours, but that July morning felt like driving through molasses. Every mile marker reminded me of the distance I'd put between myself and the family that raised me. Papa Miguel had called it my northern adventure when I left for Oregon State to study environmental engineering. What started as a 4-year degree had stretched into a decade of building a career in sustainable architecture, designing green buildings that respected the earth instead of bulldozing through it. My phone buzzed against the passenger seat. Another text from Aunt Carmen. "Mija, the reading is at 10 sharp. Don't be late." As if being late was my greatest sin. As if the past 10 years of missing quinceañeras and Christmas posadas hadn't already sealed my fate in the Rodriguez family hierarchy. I pulled into the parking lot of Henderson Associates 15 minutes early, my hybrid Prius looking conspicuously out of place among the lifted trucks and luxury SUVs that screamed Central Valley money. Through the tinted windows, I could see Tyler's massive Ram pickup taking up 2 spaces, the Rodriguez Construction logo gleaming on the door. Everything about my homecoming felt orchestrated to remind me I no longer belonged. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, smiled warmly when I approached her desk. "You must be Elena. Mr. Henderson is expecting you. Conference room B, down the hall to your left." Her voice carried the gentle familiarity of someone who remembered when Papa Miguel was just Miguel, with dirt under his fingernails and dreams bigger than his bank account. I found them already seated around the conference table like a tribunal. Aunt Carmen occupied the head position, her black dress and pearls suggesting she'd already crowned herself matriarch. Tyler sat to her right, his expensive suit straining slightly over the belly that 3 years of desk work had gifted him. Sophia perched beside him, her manicured fingers drumming nervously against her purse. Uncle Roberto, Papa Miguel's youngest son, looked uncomfortable in his rarely worn tie, eyes avoiding mine as I entered. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was the thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who'd known our family since Papa Miguel's first commercial contract. He cleared his throat and opened a leather portfolio that seemed to contain the sum total of my grandfather's legacy. "Thank you all for coming. Miguel Rodriguez was very specific about how this proceeding should unfold." What followed was 45 minutes of methodical distribution. The main construction company went to Tyler, complete with its fleet of vehicles, equipment, and contracts worth several million annually. Sophia received the landscaping division, which had grown into a separate entity specializing in commercial properties throughout the Central Valley. Uncle Roberto inherited 2 rental properties and a modest cash settlement. Aunt Carmen got the family home on Elm Street, the Victorian that Papa Miguel had restored room by room over 30 years. Each bequest came with Mr. Henderson reading Papa Miguel's personal notes. For Tyler, you have the ambition to grow what I started. Use it wisely, mijo. For Sophia, your eye for beauty will help our clients see possibilities in empty spaces. For Roberto, stability was always your gift. These properties will provide it. For Aunt Carmen, the house needs someone who understands its history and will honor its future. For me, there was only silence. When Mr. Henderson closed the portfolio and removed his glasses, the finality hit like concrete setting too fast. That concludes the formal reading of Miguel Rodriguez's last will and testament, dated March 1st of this year. He paused, glancing around the room. Are there any questions? Tyler couldn't resist the moment. Just one. Why isn't Elena mentioned? I mean, she was family too, right? The mock concern in his voice made my stomach clench. This wasn't surprise. This was theater. Mr. Henderson looked genuinely uncomfortable. Mr. Rodriguez was very deliberate in his decisions. I can only execute what he documented. He turned to me with what seemed like genuine regret. Elena, I'm sorry, your grandfather never explained his reasoning to me. I found my voice, though it came out steadier than I felt. Papa Miguel always had his reasons. I'm sure this is exactly what he intended. The words tasted like sawdust, but they preserved what little dignity remained in the room. As chairs scraped across polished floors and papers rustled into briefcases, Tyler approached me with the predatory confidence of someone who just inherited an empire. Elena, listen, I know this is tough, but you built a good life up north, right? Maybe this is Papa's way of saying it's time to bloom where you're planted. He paused, his smile never reaching his eyes. The family business was always meant for family who stuck around. I nodded, gathered my purse, and walked out of that conference room with my head high and my heart breaking. But driving away from Henderson and Associates, something nagged at me. Papa Miguel had raised me on stories of chess masters and military strategists, men who thought 20 moves ahead while their opponents focused on the next piece to capture. He'd never made a decision without considering every angle, every consequence, every person affected. The man who taught me that problems were just puzzles waiting for the right approach wouldn't exclude me.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
By accident. Which meant this was intentional. Which meant I was missing something crucial. I drove to the old house on Elm Street, parking across the street under the ancient oak where Papa Miguel used to sit and watch the neighborhood kids play. The Victorian looked exactly as I remembered, its green paint fresh and its garden immaculate. Aunt Carmen's car wasn't in the driveway yet, which gave me time to think without interruption. Papa Miguel had always been a man of patterns. Every Sunday he made his famous café con leche using the same chipped blue mug. Every birthday, he'd hide a small gift somewhere in the house and give cryptic clues until the celebrant found it. Every Christmas morning, he'd disappear for an hour to check on the animals at a job site, though we never questioned why construction equipment needed daily care during the holidays. The birthday tradition hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. For 28 years, Papa Miguel had never missed acknowledging my March 15th birthday. Even during my rebellious teenage phase, when I'd roll my eyes at his elaborate treasure hunts, he'd persist with patient humor. "Princessa," he'd say, "some gifts are worth working for. The best ones always are." 2 weeks before his death, Papa Miguel had called me in Portland. I'd been rushing between meetings, barely paying attention as he rambled about updating his home security system. "Elena, mija, you remember your birthday numbers, yes? March 15, 96? Such important numbers. They open many doors, no?" At the time, I'd assumed he was making small talk, maybe showing early signs of the confusion that sometimes comes with age. Now, sitting in my car, staring at the house where I'd learned to measure twice and cut once, those words echoed with new meaning. Papa Miguel never spoke randomly. Every conversation had purpose. Every statement served a function.
He'd been telling me something specific about numbers and doors, and my birthday wasn't casual conversation. It was a combination. The memory unlocked like a vault door swinging open. Papa Miguel's study, tucked behind the kitchen and what used to be a sunroom before he enclosed it with rich walnut paneling. The massive safe he'd installed when I was 12, claiming it was for important papers and family treasures. For years, he had let me try to guess the combination during birthday visits, turning it into a game that always ended with promises that someday, when you're ready, you'll figure it out. I'd assumed it contained construction contracts, maybe some emergency cash and grandmother's jewelry. But Papa Miguel was a man who planned for contingencies most people never considered. What if the safe held more than family heirlooms? What if it contained the real inheritance, hidden from lawyers and relatives who'd proven their character over the past decade? The front door key was still hidden under the ceramic frog beside the porch steps, exactly where it had been for 15 years. Muscle memory guided me through the familiar hallway, past the kitchen where Papa Miguel had taught me to make perfect tortillas, beyond the living room where 3 generations of Rodriguez family photos documented births, graduations, and celebrations I'd missed while building my life in Oregon. His study smelt like leather and old wood, exactly as I remembered. The massive black steel monument that had intimidated me as a child. Its digital lock face stared back like a challenge, waiting for numbers that could unlock whatever Papa Miguel had really intended for his granddaughter who'd chosen trees over concrete. My hands trembled as I entered the first digits: 0, 3, 1, 5, 9, 6. The numbers that marked my entry into the world 28 years ago. The date Papa Miguel had celebrated every year with handmade gifts and terrible jokes about getting older. If I was wrong, if this was just wishful thinking born from grief and disappointment, the safe would remain sealed, and I'd have to accept that my grandfather had genuinely written me out of his legacy. The lock clicked. Tumblers shifted. The heavy door swung open with a soft hydraulic whisper. Inside wasn't what I expected. No neat stacks of cash or safety deposit box keys. Instead, manila folders organized with the same methodical precision Papa Miguel brought to every construction project. Each folder bore a label written in his careful block letters. Property deeds, investment portfolios, business partnerships, bank account numbers, partnership agreements with firms I'd never heard of. I pulled out the first folder and nearly dropped it. Property deeds for commercial buildings throughout California's Central Valley, each stamped and notarized over the past 15 years. Shopping centers in Fresno, office complexes in Modesto, apartment buildings in Sacramento. Properties worth millions that existed completely separate from Rodriguez Construction's known assets. The second folder contained investment statements from accounts Tyler and Sophia clearly knew nothing about. Municipal bonds, blue-chip stocks, technology companies whose names I recognized from my sustainable architecture work. The balances made my head spin. Papa Miguel hadn't just built a construction company. He'd been quietly assembling a financial empire while everyone focused on trucks and equipment. But the third folder stopped my breathing entirely. Partnership agreements with environmental consulting firms, renewable energy companies, and sustainable development groups. Projects spanning from San Francisco to San Diego, all focused on green building practices and ecological restoration. Papa Miguel had been investing in the exact industry I'd built my career around, apparently for years before I'd even chosen my college major. At the bottom of the safe, wrapped in oiled leather like a sacred document, was a letter addressed in Papa Miguel's unmistakable handwriting. Para mi princesa Elena, who sees tomorrow's forest in today's seedling. My hands shook as I unfolded pages that would reshape everything I thought I knew about my grandfather, my family, and my place in both. The letter felt heavier than paper should, as if Papa Miguel's intentions had given it physical weight. I settled into his old leather chair, the one that still held the faint scent of his aftershave and the sawdust that never quite washed out of his clothes. The study windows filtered afternoon sunlight across pages that would either vindicate my decade in Oregon or confirm that grief was making me see patterns where none existed. Mi querida Elena, the letter began. If you are reading this, then the combination worked and you remembered that birthdays matter more than blood. By now you have seen the folders. By now you understand that what happened in that lawyer's office was not the end of your story, but the beginning of your real inheritance. My grandfather.
Handwriting had always been precise, each letter formed with the same care he applied to blueprint measurements. But this felt different, more deliberate, as if he'd written and rewritten these words until they carried exactly the weight he intended. For 10 years, I watched you build something beautiful in Portland. Not just a career, mija, but a philosophy. You saw what I took too long to understand, that we can build without destroying, that we can grow without consuming everything in our path. While Tyler learned to operate machinery and Sophia learned to design landscapes, you learned to heal the earth. That vision, that wisdom, that is what our family really needs. The letter continued for 3 pages, detailing investments Papa Miguel had made based on research into my work, my industry, my values. He'd been tracking sustainable architecture firms, environmental restoration companies, and green energy initiatives for years, not as a distant observer, but as a silent partner. The man I thought was stuck in old-school construction had been quietly building a portfolio that aligned with everything I believed about responsible development. The will they read today distributes what the family expects to inherit. Tyler gets the construction company because he has the ambition to expand it, though not necessarily the wisdom to expand it well. Sophia gets the landscaping business because she understands beauty, though not yet sustainability. Roberto gets security because that is what he has always needed. Carmen gets the house because she will preserve its memories. I paused, setting the letter down to absorb what Papa Miguel was really saying. He hadn't excluded me from the will by accident or anger. He'd excluded me by design, separating the traditional family business from something larger, something that aligned with the path I'd chosen despite family disapproval. But you, Princessa, you get the future. Not just money, though there is plenty of that. You get the chance to prove that business and conscience are not enemies. The properties in these folders were purchased specifically for sustainable development. The partnerships were formed with companies that share your vision. The investments were made in technologies that will reshape how we build, how we power our communities, how we live without destroying tomorrow for today's profit. The scope of what Papa Miguel had assembled was staggering. Commercial properties positioned perfectly for solar installations, vacant lots in growing cities zoned for mixed-use development, partnerships with firms that specialized in green retrofitting and energy-efficient construction. He'd essentially created a renewable energy and sustainable development empire, then hidden it in a safe that only I could open. Tyler will expand Rodriguez Construction by bidding bigger projects and buying more equipment. He will make money and he will employ people, and that is good. But you, Elena, you will transform how construction happens. You will prove that the girl who left for Oregon did not abandon the family business. You revolutionized it. I had to stop reading to wipe tears that were blurring Papa Miguel's careful script. The man I thought disapproved of my environmental focus had actually been building me a platform to implement it on a scale I'd never imagined possible. While I'd been designing individual green buildings in Portland, he'd been acquiring the foundation for an entire sustainable development company. The total value is approximately $83 million, though that number grows monthly through carefully chosen investments. More important than the money is the opportunity. You now have the resources to show California, and eventually the country, that development and environmental responsibility are not just compatible, but profitable. $83 million. The number sat in my mind like a boulder, too large to fully comprehend. Papa Miguel had built this fortune quietly, methodically, while maintaining the image of a traditional contractor who preferred concrete to computers. But the investment records showed a man who understood technology, environmental trends, and market forces with sophistication that would impress any MBA program. I know you are wondering why I did not simply leave this to you in the will, why I chose this elaborate arrangement instead of straightforward inheritance. The answer is simple. I needed to see how the family would treat you when they believed you had nothing to offer them. I needed you to see their true character when they thought you were powerless. The words hit like cold water. Papa Miguel had orchestrated this entire scenario as a test, not just of my character, but of Tyler's, Sophia's, everyone's. He wanted to see who showed kindness when there was no benefit to gain, who demonstrated loyalty when there was no advantage to preserve. The will reading hadn't been about distributing assets. It had been about revealing souls. Tyler's reaction tells me he views family relationships as transactions. Sophia's silence tells me she follows rather than leads. Cotterman's acceptance tells me she believes in hierarchy more than justice. Roberto's discomfort tells me he knows right from wrong, but lacks courage to speak it. These are not character flaws, mija. They are simply limitations that must be considered when building anything that will last. I thought back to Tyler's parting words about blooming where I was planted, delivered with such smug satisfaction. He believed he was dismissing a defeated rival, but Papa Miguel had designed the moment to reveal exactly who my cousin really was when he thought he held all the power. But you, Elena, you walked out of that room with dignity intact. You did not beg or argue or diminish yourself for scraps from their table. That strength, that self-respect, that is what leadership looks like. That is why you are the right person to carry this responsibility forward. The letter's final pages outlined Papa Miguel's vision for what I could accomplish with these resources. Sustainable housing developments that proved green building could be profitable, commercial properties retrofitted with renewable energy systems that demonstrated environmental responsibility as competitive advantage, partnerships with universities and research institutions to pioneer new technologies and methods. This is not charity, Princesa. This is investment in someone who has already proven she can succeed while staying true to her values. Your work in Portland shows you understand both the technical and business aspects of sustainable development. Now you have the capital to scale that knowledge into something that changes industries, not just individual projects. Even included specific recommendations for my first moves, properties that were perfectly positioned for demonstration projects, potential partnerships with companies whose values aligned with mine.
Market analysis showing where sustainable development was moving from niche to necessity. Papa Miguel had done more than accumulate wealth. He'd created a roadmap for implementing change. I will not live to see what you build with these resources, but I do not need to. I have watched you work since you were small, mixing concrete in my garage, asking why we could not use recycled materials, wondering if there were ways to build that helped instead of hurt the environment. Those questions, that curiosity, that conscience, those are the tools that matter most. The money is just lumber and nails. The letter concluded with instructions for accessing bank accounts, contacting investment managers, and transferring partnerships into my name. But the final paragraph was pure Papa Miguel, practical and sentimental in equal measure. One last thing, mija. The safe combination is not just your birthday. It is the day you became possible, the day our family gained someone who would see further than the rest of us. Every year when I celebrated that date, I was not just commemorating your birth. I was celebrating the arrival of someone who would carry our name into a future we could not imagine without her. Use this gift wisely, not because I am watching, but because the world needs what you can build with it. I sat in that leather chair for 20 minutes after finishing the letter, watching dust motes dance in afternoon sunlight while my mind processed the magnitude of what had just shifted in my life. This morning, I'd been Elena Rodriguez, unemployed, environmental engineer, whose family had written her off as an idealistic failure. This evening, I was Elena Rodriguez,
owner of an $83 million sustainable development empire that existed specifically to prove that conscience and commerce could coexist. The bank account information alone required 3 phone calls to verify. Private wealth managers in San Francisco who'd been expecting my contact for months, investment advisors who'd worked with Papa Miguel to build portfolios focused on renewable energy and environmental technology, property managers overseeing commercial real estate throughout California, all acquired with an eye towards sustainable redevelopment. Each conversation confirmed what the letter had outlined. Papa Miguel hadn't just been investing money, he'd been building infrastructure for exactly the kind of work I'd spent a decade learning to do. Solar installation companies that needed reliable commercial partners, green building consultants who specialized in retrofitting existing structures, architectural firms that focused exclusively on sustainable design. But perhaps most stunning was discovering that Papa Miguel had been following my career more closely than anyone in the family realized. The investment managers mentioned specific projects I'd worked on in Portland, innovations I'd helped develop, recognition I'd received from professional organizations. Papa Miguel had apparently used my published work and professional presentations to guide his investment decisions. "Your grandfather was quite proud of your LEED certification achievements," one manager mentioned casually. "He specifically instructed us to prioritize companies that were advancing similar standards." LEED certification was a rigorous environmental building standard that most people outside the architecture world had never heard of. Papa Miguel not only knew about it, but had been using it as investment criteria. Another revelation emerged during my 3rd phone call. Papa Miguel had been quietly funding scholarship programs for students pursuing environmental engineering and sustainable architecture degrees, not through the Rodriguez family name, but through a foundation he'd established using profits from his hidden investment portfolio. Students across California had been receiving educational support that traced directly back to my grandfather's belief in the importance of environmental innovation. The scope of his forward thinking was breathtaking. While Tyler and Sophia had been focused on inheriting existing businesses, Papa Miguel had been creating an entirely new enterprise built around principles they barely understood. He'd essentially handed me a company that existed at the intersection of environmental responsibility and financial success, 2 areas the traditional construction industry often viewed as incompatible. By evening, I had a clearer picture of what Papa Miguel had assembled: commercial properties strategically located for sustainable redevelopment, investment partnerships with cutting-edge environmental technology companies, relationships with municipal governments interested in green infrastructure projects, a financial foundation solid enough to take risks on innovative approaches that might not generate immediate profits but could reshape entire markets over time. The phone rang as I was organizing the documents into manageable stacks. Aunt Carmen's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But Papa Miguel's letter had reminded me that family relationships, however complicated, still mattered. "Elena, mija, are you still in town?" Her voice carried none of the coolness from the morning's proceedings. "I was hoping we could talk before you drive back to Portland." I agreed to meet her at the house, curious about what had prompted this outreach. When I arrived, she was sitting on the front porch swing Papa Miguel had installed for evening conversations, 2 cups of café con leche steaming on the small table beside her. "I keep thinking about this morning," she began without preamble, "about how you handled everything. Miguel always said you had his stubbornness, but today I saw his dignity too." He handed me one of the cups, the same chipped blue ceramic Papa Miguel had preferred. "Tyler was wrong to speak to you that way, and I was wrong to say nothing." We sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the neighborhood transition from day to evening. Children called to each other from yards where sprinklers fought the Central Valley heat. The scent of jasmine and barbecue smoke drifted from neighboring houses where families were gathering for dinner. "Carmen," I finally said, "can I ask you something honestly?" She nodded. "Did Papa Miguel ever talk to you about what he really thought of my work in Oregon?" Her laugh surprised me. Mija, that man could not stop talking about your work. Every Sunday dinner, he would find some way to mention an article you published or a project you completed. We thought he was just being a proud grandfather, but now, she paused, studying my face. Now I wonder if he was preparing us for something none of us understood. The conversation continued for another hour, touching on family dynamics, generational differences, and the challenge of honoring tradition while embracing change. Carmen shared stories about Papa Miguel, his business practices, and his unique blend of ambition and family devotion.
Miguel's final months that revealed a man consciously transitioning from builder to legacy planner. He'd spent considerable time organizing his affairs, but also researching environmental technology and sustainable business practices. He bought a computer last year, she revealed with amusement. Claimed he needed it to manage the business more efficiently, but I caught him reading articles about solar panels and wind power. When I teased him about becoming an environmentalist, he just smiled and said he was trying to understand Elena's world better. As the evening deepened and streetlights began illuminating Elm Street, I realized that Papa Miguel's plan extended beyond financial inheritance. He'd been slowly educating the family about environmental issues, introducing concepts that would help them understand my work and values. The test wasn't just about revealing character flaws. It was about creating conditions where family relationships could evolve and grow. Carmen walked me to my car when the evening grew too cool for porch sitting. Elena, I want you to know that whatever happens with the business, with Tyler and Sophia, you always have a place in this family. Miguel may have had his reasons for structuring things the way he did, but you are still his granddaughter. You are still my niece. Driving back to my hotel, I reflected on a day that had started with exclusion and evolved into revelation. Papa Miguel had given me more than money. He'd given me purpose, opportunity, and a clear understanding of where I stood with family members who might not share my values, but still cared about my well-being. The hotel room felt different when I returned, no longer a temporary refuge, but a planning space. I spread Papa Miguel's documents across the desk and began sketching preliminary ideas for projects that could demonstrate sustainable development as both environmental necessity and economic opportunity. The resources he'd accumulated were substantial enough to fund demonstration projects that could influence industry standards throughout California. But perhaps most importantly, I finally understood Papa Miguel's final lesson. True inheritance wasn't about receiving what previous generations had built. It was about using their foundation to construct something better, something that honored their sacrifices while addressing challenges they couldn't have anticipated. The safe hadn't just contained money and documents. It had contained trust, responsibility, and faith in my ability to build a future worthy of the investment. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of transforming Papa Miguel's hidden empire into something visible, something that proved sustainable development could be profitable, scalable, and transformative. Tonight, I would honor his memory by planning carefully, thinking strategically, and remembering that the best gifts always require work to fully appreciate. The combination to Papa Miguel's safe had been my birthday, but the real code he'd left me was much more complex. How to build something meaningful while staying true to your values. How to honor family while forging your own path. How to use wealth as a tool for change rather than an end in itself. Those lessons would guide every decision I made with the extraordinary opportunity he'd placed in my hands. 3 weeks after discovering Papa Miguel's hidden legacy, I found myself standing in the lobby of Rodriguez Construction's headquarters, wearing a navy blazer that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and carrying a leather portfolio that contained enough documentation to reshape the Central Valley's development landscape. The receptionist, Maria, had worked for the company since I was in high school and greeted me with surprised warmth. "Elena, what brings you back to Bakersfield? Are you here to see Tyler?" Her genuine smile carried no hint of the awkwardness I'd expected. Either Tyler hadn't shared details about the will reading, or Maria was too professional to let family drama affect her workplace demeanor. "Actually, I'm here for the quarterly contractor meeting. I should be on the list somewhere." I handed her my business card, freshly printed with my new title. Elena Rodriguez, CEO of Verde Valley Development Corporation. The company name was Papa Miguel's suggestion from his letter, combining the Spanish word for green with our region's identity. Maria's eyebrows rose slightly as she scanned her computer screen. "Oh my, yes, here you are. Conference room A, second floor. The meeting starts in 15 minutes. She paused, studying my card with growing curiosity. Verde Valley Development. Is this a new company? Relatively new.
which was technically accurate. Papa Miguel had been building the foundation for years, but the official incorporation had happened only last week. We focus on sustainable commercial development throughout California. The elevator ride to the second floor gave me time to center myself for what would likely be an uncomfortable encounter. Tyler had no idea I was attending this meeting, much less that I now controlled resources that dwarfed Rodriguez Construction's annual revenue. But Papa Miguel's instructions had been specific. Demonstrate your legitimacy through professional channels before revealing the personal connections. Conference Room A buzzed with the familiar energy of Central Valley business networking. Contractors, architects, city planners, and project managers filled chairs around a massive table that could have accommodated twice as many people. The quarterly meetings were Rodriguez Construction's way of maintaining relationships with potential partners and staying informed about upcoming development opportunities. Tyler stood at the head of the table, clearly comfortable in his role as the new company president. He'd always possessed natural charisma and enough technical knowledge to command respect from industry professionals. What he lacked in vision, he compensated with confidence and an inherited network of relationships that opened doors throughout the region. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our third quarter partnership meeting. As most of you know, Rodriguez Construction has been serving the Central Valley for 40 years, and we're excited to discuss expansion opportunities that will benefit everyone in this room. Tyler's presentation skills had improved since taking over the company, though his focus remained firmly traditional. Bigger projects, higher profits, faster completion timelines. I slipped into an empty chair near the back, hoping to observe the dynamics before making my presence known. The agenda covered upcoming municipal contracts, residential developments planned for the next 18 months, and infrastructure projects that would require collaborative bidding. Everything Tyler discussed represented the kind of growth-focused approach that had made Rodriguez
Construction successful, but environmentally unsustainable. Our biggest opportunity is the Westfield Commons project, Tyler continued, clicking through PowerPoint slides that showed a massive retail and residential complex planned for previously undeveloped land on Bakersfield's western edge. 60 acres of mixed-use development, potentially worth $40 million in construction contracts. The city wants to fast-track approval to stimulate economic growth. Several contractors leaned forward with obvious interest. $40 million represented the kind of project that could sustain multiple companies for years. But the environmental impact assessment hadn't been mentioned, nor had any consideration of sustainable building practices or renewable energy integration. Tyler was presenting Westfield Commons as a traditional development opportunity without acknowledging the environmental costs or long-term sustainability challenges. Elena Rodriguez, Verde Valley Development Corporation, I said, when Tyler opened the floor for questions and partnership discussions. The room turned toward me with varying degrees of recognition and curiosity. Some faces showed confusion, clearly trying to place my name and connection to the family business. Others, particularly older contractors who remembered Papa Miguel's early days, nodded with interest. Tyler's confident expression faltered slightly. "Elena, I didn't realize you were back in town. Are you representing a Portland firm?" His tone carried polite confusion with an undertone of territorial concern. In his mind, I was still the granddaughter who'd abandoned the family business for environmental idealism. "Actually, I'm here representing my own company. Verde Valley Development specializes in sustainable commercial projects throughout California." I stood and walked toward the front of the room, maintaining the same professional composure that had served me well in Portland's competitive architecture market. "We're particularly interested in projects like Westfield Commons that offer opportunities to demonstrate profitable environmental responsibility." The room's energy shifted as I moved into Tyler's presentation space. This wasn't a family reunion or casual networking. This was a business professional making a strategic move in front of industry decision-makers who could influence millions of dollars in future contracts. "Sustainable development," Tyler repeated, his tone suggesting the phrase was foreign territory. "That's interesting, Elena, but I'm not sure how that applies to Westfield Commons. The city wants completion speed and cost efficiency. Environmental add-ons typically increase both timelines and budgets." "Environmental integration," I corrected gently. "And actually, that's exactly backwards in today's market." I opened my portfolio and pulled out documentation that Papa Miguel's research team had prepared. California's new energy efficiency requirements make sustainable design mandatory for commercial projects over a certain size. Westfield Commons will need to meet those standards regardless of contractor preference.
Murmurs of recognition rippled through the room. Several city planners nodded, confirming that environmental compliance was indeed becoming standard rather than optional. Tyler's confident presentation had overlooked crucial regulatory requirements. The project he'd positioned as straightforward traditional development would actually require exactly the kind of expertise I was offering. Verde Valley Development has successfully completed 12 sustainable commercial projects throughout the Pacific Northwest. Our average cost overrun is less than 3%, and our completion timeline actually runs faster than traditional construction because we integrate environmental systems during initial design rather than retrofitting later. The portfolio I'd assembled showcased projects that demonstrated sustainable development as competitive advantage rather than expensive burden. Solar panel installations that paid themselves off within 4 years, water conservation systems that reduced operational costs by thousands of dollars annually, building materials that provided better insulation while costing less than traditional alternatives. This is the Morrison office complex in Portland, 40% energy reduction compared to comparable buildings, 15% higher tenant retention, 20% premium rental rates. The client saved money during construction and earns additional revenue every month. Several contractors in the room leaned forward to examine the documentation more closely. These were practical business people who understood that environmental benefits meant nothing without financial returns. But the projects I was showing proved that sustainable development as competitive advantage rather than expensive burden
could enhance rather than compromise profitability. Elena, Tyler said, his voice carrying forced patience. I'm sure your Portland projects are very impressive, but Central Valley Development has different requirements. Our clients need practical solutions, not experimental approaches. Experimental? I smiled, pulling out the final set of documents from my portfolio. Tyler, sustainable development isn't experimental anymore. It's standard practice in competitive markets. Which brings me to Verde Valley Development's proposal for Westfield Commons. The room went completely silent as I distributed copies of a comprehensive development plan that Papa Miguel's team had been preparing for months. The proposal outlined a mixed-use complex that exceeded the city's environmental requirements while reducing construction costs through innovative design and materials sourcing. Verde Valley Development is prepared to partner with Rodriguez Construction on Westfield Commons, I announced. We'll handle environmental design and compliance, while Rodriguez provides traditional construction expertise. The partnership allows both companies to compete for projects neither could win independently. Tyler stared at the proposal documents with growing confusion and concern. The plan was professionally comprehensive, demonstrating the kind of technical expertise and financial backing that typically required years of industry experience. Where had his cousin, who'd supposedly been designing individual buildings in Portland, acquired the resources and knowledge to develop 40-acre commercial complexes? Elena, I appreciate the offer, Tyler said carefully. But partnership arrangements require extensive vetting. Verde Valley Development is obviously new, and Rodriguez Construction has reputation standards to maintain. Of course, I agreed. That's why Verde Valley Development has prepared comprehensive financial documentation for any potential partners. I handed Tyler a sealed envelope containing bank statements, insurance policies, and bonding capacity certificates that would demonstrate my company's ability to handle multi-million-dollar projects. Tyler opened the envelope with the casual confidence of someone expecting to find typical startup documentation. His expression changed dramatically as he scanned the first page. Bank balances in the tens of millions, insurance coverage exceeding Rodriguez Construction's limits, bonding capacity that could handle projects twice the size of Westfield Commons. Where did you get this kind of backing? Tyler asked, his voice barely concealing shock. The financial documentation showed a company with resources that dwarfed most Central Valley contractors, yet Verde Valley Development had seemingly appeared overnight. Strategic investors who understand that sustainable development represents the future of commercial construction, I replied truthfully. Papa Miguel qualified as a strategic investor, even if Tyler didn't yet understand the full implications of that relationship. The room buzzed with renewed interest as contractors realized they were witnessing a significant shift in Central Valley development dynamics. Verde Valley Development's emergence represented new opportunities for companies smart enough to embrace change and serious challenges for those who clung to traditional approaches.
Rodriguez Construction has always been family-owned and operated, Tyler said slowly, clearly struggling to process this unexpected development. We've never needed outside partnerships to compete for projects. Tyler, interrupted Frank Morales, a veteran contractor who'd worked with Papa Miguel since the early days. Maybe it's time to consider new approaches. The industry is changing, and companies that adapt survive while others get left behind. Frank's comment carried particular weight because he'd been Papa Miguel's closest professional ally. If he endorsed collaboration with Verde Valley Development, other contractors would likely follow his lead. Tyler found himself facing a room full of industry professionals who viewed my proposal as opportunity rather than threat. I need time to review this proposal properly, Tyler said, gathering the documents with obvious reluctance. Verde Valley Development's offer raises questions that require careful consideration. Absolutely, I agreed. Take all the time you need. Verde Valley Development is committed to partnerships that benefit everyone involved. I collected my materials and prepared to leave, having accomplished exactly what Papa Miguel's strategy had outlined. Elena, Tyler called as I reached the conference room door. Can we talk privately after the meeting? Of course. I'll be in town for the rest of the week. I handed him my business card, the same one that had surprised Maria downstairs. Call whenever you're ready to discuss details. Walking back to the elevator, I could hear excited conversations erupting behind me as contractors realized they'd just witnessed a significant shift in Central Valley development dynamics. Verde Valley Development's emergence represented new opportunities for companies smart enough to embrace change and serious challenges for those who clung to traditional approaches. Maria looked up with curious interest as I passed through the lobby. How did the meeting go? Tyler looked surprised when he saw you come in. I think everyone was surprised, I replied honestly. But sometimes surprise is exactly what business relationships need to evolve and grow. The drive back to my hotel gave me time to reflect on a morning that had exceeded my expectations. Tyler's reaction confirmed Papa Miguel's assessment of his character. Ambitious and confident, but inflexible when confronted with approaches he didn't understand. The other contractor's enthusiasm suggested that Central Valley Development was ready for sustainable innovation, even if Rodriguez Construction needed time to adapt. My phone buzzed with a text message from Tyler. Elena, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the office tomorrow morning? This conversation is bigger than Westfield Commons. I smiled, remembering Papa Miguel's prediction that Tyler would eventually recognize the value of family partnerships he'd initially dismissed. The real test wouldn't be whether my cousin accepted Verde Valley Development as a legitimate company, but whether he could accept me as an equal partner rather than the idealistic granddaughter he'd written off years ago. Papa Miguel's strategy was working exactly as he had planned. Tyler was beginning to understand that environmental expertise wasn't optional luxury, but competitive necessity. More importantly, he was starting to realize that his cousin's decade in Oregon had produced something more valuable than he had ever imagined. Tomorrow's
conversation would determine whether Rodriguez Construction evolved into a company that could thrive in California's changing development landscape or remain stuck in approaches that were becoming obsolete. Either way, Verde Valley Development would continue building the sustainable future Papa Miguel had envisioned, with or without family collaboration. The evening news featured a story about California's new environmental mandates for commercial development, emphasizing that sustainability requirements would affect billions of dollars in future construction projects. Watching from my hotel room, I realized that Papa Miguel had positioned me perfectly to benefit from regulatory changes that most contractors were just beginning to understand. His hidden inheritance hadn't just provided financial resources, it had given me a timing advantage that could establish Verde Valley Development as the Central Valley's leading sustainable development company before traditional contractors learned to compete effectively in the new marketplace. Tyler's call would come tomorrow, but the outcome was already determined. Papa Miguel had ensured that family loyalty and business necessity would eventually align, creating conditions where collaboration became inevitable rather than optional. The only question was whether my cousin would embrace change gracefully or require additional demonstration of Verde Valley Development's competitive advantages. Tyler's call came at 7 in the morning, earlier than I'd expected, but exactly when Papa Miguel would have started his workday. Elena, I've been up all night reviewing your proposal. We need to meet immediately. Not at the office, somewhere private. Can you come to the house on Elm Street?
The urgency in his voice suggested he'd discovered something that fundamentally changed his understanding of Verde Valley Development's capabilities. I agreed to meet him in an hour, curious about what overnight research had revealed and whether it would lead to collaboration or confrontation. The Victorian looked peaceful in the early morning light, its garden displaying the careful maintenance that Aunt Carmen had promised to continue. Tyler's truck was already in the driveway, parked beside a silver BMW I didn't recognize. Through the front windows, I could see movement in Papa Miguel's former study, suggesting Tyler had been examining something in the room where I'd discovered the safe just weeks earlier. He answered the door before I could knock, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something approaching bewilderment. "Elena, thank you for coming so early. There's someone here I think you need to meet." He led me toward the study, where a woman in her 50s sat behind Papa Miguel's desk, surrounded by financial documents and legal papers. "Elena Rodriguez," Tyler said formally. "This is Margaret Stevenson from Pinnacle Wealth Management in San Francisco. She's been managing certain aspects of Papa Miguel's investments for the past 7 years." Margaret stood to shake my hand, her professional smile carrying the practiced warmth of someone accustomed to handling sensitive family financial matters. "Miss Rodriguez, your grandfather spoke of you often. He was extraordinarily proud of your accomplishments in sustainable architecture." Miss Stevenson flew down this morning after Tyler called about Verde Valley Development. "Apparently there are connections between your company and Papa Miguel's estate that I wasn't aware of." Margaret gestured for us to sit in the chairs facing Papa Miguel's desk, the same arrangement where he conducted business for decades. "Mr. Tyler Rodriguez contacted me last night asking about Verde Valley Development's financial backing. Given the family relationships involved, I felt it was appropriate to clarify certain aspects of your grandfather's estate planning." Tyler leaned forward, hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Elena, Papa Miguel apparently invested over $80 million in creating Verde Valley Development. Everything you showed us yesterday, the financial backing, the technical expertise, the strategic partnerships, it all traces back to investments he made specifically for you." The relief I felt was unexpected. For weeks, I'd carried the weight of Papa Miguel's secret alone, uncertain how or when to reveal the full scope of his hidden inheritance. Tyler's discovery through official channels provided exactly the kind of external validation that Papa Miguel had predicted would be necessary. "Your grandfather was quite specific about the timing of these revelations. He instructed me to maintain confidentiality until Verde Valley Development became operationally active. Your presentation yesterday triggered the disclosure protocols he'd established." Tyler stood up abruptly and walked to the window overlooking Papa Miguel's garden. "Elena, I owe you an enormous apology. When you were excluded from the will reading, I thought it confirmed what I'd always believed about Papa Miguel's feelings toward your choices. I had no idea he'd actually given you the most valuable part of his legacy." "Tyler, Papa Miguel designed this situation to test everyone's character, including mine. He wanted to see how we'd all behave when we thought I had nothing to inherit." "Well, I failed that test spectacularly," Tyler replied, turning back toward me with genuine remorse. "My comments about blooming where you're planted, the implications that you'd abandon the family, everything I said was wrong and cruel." Margaret cleared her throat diplomatically. "If I may, your grandfather anticipated these dynamics. His instructions included specific guidance for family relationship management once the Verde Valley development structure became known." She opened a leather portfolio and pulled out another letter in Papa Miguel's handwriting, this one addressed to Tyler and Elena Rodriguez, partners in the future. Tyler's eyes widened as he realized Papa Miguel had orchestrated this entire revelation, including the timing and circumstances of our reconciliation. "He wanted you both to discover Verde Valley Development's true backing only after you'd worked together professionally," Margaret explained. "His theory was that family relationships complicated by inheritance disputes could be healed through successful business collaboration." Tyler read aloud from Papa Miguel's letter. "Tyler, by now you understand that Elena's environmental expertise isn't idealistic luxury, but competitive necessity. Elena, by now you understand that Tyler's traditional construction knowledge provides the foundation for scaling sustainable development throughout California. Neither of you can accomplish alone what you can achieve together." And Verde Valley Development into a partnership that could dominate Central Valley sustainable development while expanding into markets throughout the western United States.
Papa Miguel had envisioned a family business empire built on environmental innovation rather than traditional construction alone. He allocated $20 million specifically for joint ventures between Rodriguez Construction and Verde Valley Development, Margaret continued. Projects that demonstrate profitable collaboration between traditional construction expertise and sustainable development innovation. Tyler sat heavily in his chair, processing the magnitude of what Papa Miguel had actually orchestrated. Elena, he didn't just give you an inheritance, he created a business partnership that requires both of our skill sets to succeed. More than that, I said, scanning Papa Miguel's detailed partnership recommendations. He structured it so that Rodriguez Construction's success depends on embracing sustainable development, while Verde Valley Development's growth requires traditional construction capabilities. The interdependence was brilliant in its simplicity. Tyler could continue expanding Rodriguez Construction, but the most profitable projects would require environmental expertise that only Verde Valley Development possessed. I could implement sustainable development throughout California, but the construction infrastructure necessary for large-scale projects remained concentrated in companies like Rodriguez Construction. Your grandfather believed that family businesses succeed across generations only when they evolve to meet changing market conditions, Margaret observed. He saw environmental regulation and consumer preferences shifting towards sustainability, and he positioned both companies to benefit from those changes. Tyler walked over to Papa Miguel's desk and picked up a framed photo of our grandfather as a young man, standing beside his first construction truck. Elena, I've been thinking about Rodriguez Construction's future since inheriting the company. Honestly, I've been worried about staying competitive as environmental regulations increase and younger clients demand sustainable options. And I've been concerned about Verde Valley Development's ability to scale sustainable projects without established construction partnerships and local market knowledge, I admitted. Papa Miguel understood our individual limitations better than we did. Margaret smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd helped implement a complex plan that was finally reaching fruition. Your grandfather spent considerable time researching successful family business transitions. He concluded that forcing collaboration through financial necessity was more effective than hoping for voluntary cooperation. The morning evolved into a comprehensive planning session as Tyler and I discovered the full scope of Papa Miguel's vision for our partnership. Joint bidding on major projects that neither company could win independently, shared research and development costs for innovative construction methods, combined marketing that positions Central Valley Development as both economically efficient and environmentally responsible. The Westfield Commons project could be our first major collaboration, Tyler suggested, his enthusiasm building as he understood the competitive advantages we could offer together. Rodriguez Construction handles traditional infrastructure, while Verde Valley Development manages environmental integration. With our combined resources, we could propose a development timeline that's actually faster than traditional construction, I added, referencing Papa Miguel's research on sustainable building efficiency. Environmental integration during initial design eliminates the delays and cost overruns associated with retrofitting. Margaret provided documentation showing that Papa Miguel had been monitoring Westfield Commons development plans for months, anticipating that it would provide the perfect opportunity for Rodriguez Construction and Verde Valley Development to demonstrate their partnership capabilities. He even commissioned preliminary environmental impact studies and sustainable design recommendations, Margaret revealed, handing us a folder containing architectural drawings and engineering specifications. Your grandfather understood that successful partnerships require detailed preparation, not just good intentions. The designs were sophisticated beyond anything I'd expected, incorporating solar panel integration, rainwater collection systems, and energy-efficient material sourcing that would reduce long-term operational costs while meeting California's environmental requirements. Papa Miguel had essentially done the preliminary work necessary for us to submit a winning bid. Elena, this changes everything about how I understand the family business, Tyler said, studying architectural drawings that demonstrated environmental integration as competitive advantage rather than regulatory burden. Papa Miguel wasn't just building a construction company, he was creating a sustainable development empire. And he structured it so that empire requires both of us to succeed,
I replied, recognizing the elegant psychology behind Papa Miguel's estate planning. We're not competing for his legacy, we're collaborating to fulfill it. By noon, we'd outlined a partnership agreement that would merge our company's capabilities while maintaining their separate identities. Rodriguez Construction would remain the traditional construction specialist, while Verde Valley Development would establish itself as the Central Valley's premier sustainable development consultant. Joint projects would operate under both names, demonstrating that environmental responsibility and construction efficiency were complementary rather than competing values. There's one more element to your grandfather's plan, Margaret said, as our planning session concluded. He established a scholarship foundation for students pursuing environmental engineering and sustainable architecture degrees. The foundation board requires both Rodriguez Construction and Verde Valley Development representatives. Tyler looked puzzled. Why would Papa Miguel care about environmental education funding? Because he understood that sustainable development's long-term success depends on training the next generation of professionals, I explained. The foundation ensures that Central Valley colleges produce graduates who understand both construction realities and environmental innovation. Margaret handed us the foundation documents, which revealed that Papa Miguel had been funding environmental education for 3 years, using profits from his hidden investment portfolio. Students throughout California had been receiving scholarships that would eventually provide the skilled workforce necessary for sustainable development expansion. Your grandfather was building infrastructure for an industry transformation that most people don't yet recognize, Margaret observed. Educational investment, regulatory preparation, financial backing, family partnership structures, everything necessary for Verde Valley Development and Rodriguez Construction to dominate California's sustainable development markets. Walking through Papa Miguel's garden after Margaret's departure, Tyler and I discussed implementation timelines and immediate priorities. The Westfield Commons bid deadline was in 2 weeks, barely enough time to prepare a comprehensive proposal that demonstrated our partnership capabilities. Elena, I need to ask you something directly, Tyler said, as we reached the greenhouse where Papa Miguel had grown vegetables for Sunday family dinners. Are you willing to move back to California permanently? This partnership only works if we're both actively involved in Central Valley development. The question I'd been avoiding since discovering Papa Miguel's inheritance finally demanded an answer. Returning to Bakersfield would mean leaving the life I'd built in Portland, abandoning professional relationships and personal connections that had sustained me through a decade of building my career independently. Tyler, I've been thinking about that since I found Papa Miguel's letter, I replied honestly. Verde Valley Development's headquarters will need to be here to serve Central Valley clients effectively. The question is whether I'm ready to rebuild my personal life in a place where I felt rejected for so long. Elena, I can't undo the years when the family made you feel unwelcome, but I can promise that won't happen again. Rodriguez Construction's future depends on Verde Valley Development's success, which means your success is essential to everyone's prosperity. The practical reality was undeniable. Papa Miguel had structured our inheritance to require collaboration and mutual respect. Tyler couldn't dismiss my environmental expertise without undermining his own company's competitiveness. I couldn't ignore traditional construction knowledge without limiting Verde Valley Development's growth potential. One condition, I said, extending my hand for the handshake that would formalize our partnership. Family Sunday dinners are mandatory for all Rodriguez Construction and Verde Valley Development executives. Papa Miguel believed that business relationships built on family foundations last longer than contracts based purely on profit. Tyler laughed and shook my hand firmly. Deal. But fair warning, Aunt Carmen still makes enough food for twice as many people as actually show up. Perfect. Verde Valley Development staff meetings will include whoever wants to stay for dinner. The image of environmental engineers and construction supervisors sharing tamales and arguing about building codes felt exactly like the kind of unconventional family business Papa Miguel would have appreciated. Our first joint project proposal took 12 days to complete, requiring coordination between architectural design, environmental compliance, construction logistics, and financial planning. The process revealed how much Tyler and I had learned during our separate decades of professional development. knowledge that combined into capabilities neither of us possessed individually. The Westfield Commons presentation drew municipal officials, competing contractors, and local media to Rodriguez Construction's conference room. Tyler handled traditional construction elements while I presented environmental integration strategies. Our combined proposal offered completion timelines 20% faster than traditional development, and operational costs 30% lower than comparable retail complexes. Rodriguez Construction and Verde Valley Development's partnership represents exactly the kind of innovation Central Valley Development needs, declared Sandra Chen, Bakersfield's municipal planning director, as she announced that our joint bid had won the Westfield Commons contract. The celebration dinner at the house on Elm Street included 3 generations of Rodriguez family members, Verde Valley Development staff, and Rodriguez Construction supervisors who were still adjusting to the idea that environmental considerations could accelerate rather than delay project completion. Papa Miguel would be proud of what you've built together, Aunt Carmen said, as Tyler and I stood beside the kitchen window where our grandfather had taught us to measure ingredients precisely. He always believed that family businesses succeed when they grow with the times instead of fighting against change. 6 months later, Westfield Commons was ahead of schedule and under budget, demonstrating that sustainable development could deliver competitive advantages throughout the construction process. Verde Valley Development had expanded to include 12 environmental engineers and 3 architectural designers. Rodriguez Construction had hired additional project managers to handle increasing demand for environmentally integrated construction. The success attracted attention from municipal governments throughout California's Central Valley, resulting in project invitations that exceeded our current capacity. Papa Miguel's vision of family business empire built on environmental innovation was becoming reality faster than either Tyler or I had anticipated possible. Standing in the conference room where Verde Valley Development and Rodriguez Construction now held joint staff meetings, I often thought about Papa Miguel's letter and the birthday combination that had unlocked everything. The safe in his study remained open, now serving as a bookshelf for environmental engineering textbooks and construction management guides that our combined staff consulted regularly. Papa Miguel's final lesson had proven itself through practical application. Sustainable development wasn't idealistic luxury, but competitive necessity. Family partnerships required mutual respect and shared vision to survive generational transitions, and the best inheritance was opportunity to build something meaningful rather than simply maintain what previous generations had constructed. The foundation scholarships were producing graduates who understood both environmental science and construction realities, ensuring that Central Valley sustainable development would continue expanding long after Tyler and I retired. Papa Miguel's strategic thinking had extended decades into the future, creating infrastructure for industry transformation that most people were just beginning to recognize. Tyler and I still disagreed about specific project approaches and business priorities, but those disagreements now occurred within a framework of mutual respect and shared goals, passion for sustainable development, and opportunity to create something meaningful together.
Commitment to Papa Miguel's vision. Family Sunday dinners had evolved into working meals, where environmental engineers and construction supervisors planned projects that balanced ecological responsibility with financial success. The birthday combination that unlocked Papa Miguel's safe had revealed more than hidden wealth. It had demonstrated that true inheritance consisted of values, vision, and opportunity rather than simply money and property. Papa Miguel's greatest gift hadn't been $83 million. It had been faith in my ability to use those resources wisely, trust in Tyler's willingness to embrace necessary changes, and confidence that family relationships could evolve to support shared purposes. Rodriguez Construction and Verde Valley Development's partnership had proven that environmental responsibility and economic success were complementary rather than competing values. More importantly, it had shown that family business succession could honor tradition while embracing innovation, creating enterprises that served multiple generations rather than simply preserving what previous generations had built.
Papa Miguel's estate planning had accomplished something more valuable than wealth transfer. It had created conditions where family members, who might have remained distant, learned to collaborate effectively, where business enterprises adapted to changing market conditions rather than becoming obsolete, and where individual talents combined into capabilities that exceeded what anyone could achieve alone. The secret safe had contained the future, carefully planned and precisely positioned for the family members capable of building it. Papa Miguel's birthday gift had been the key to unlocking potential that none of us had recognized until circumstances forced us to see ourselves and each other differently. 5 years had passed since that morning when Tyler and I shook hands in Papa Miguel's garden, but the memory remained as vivid as the California sun that now warmed the expansive headquarters of Rodriguez Verde Development Corporation. What had started as an awkward partnership between estranged cousins had evolved into the Central Valley's most successful sustainable development enterprise, with projects spanning from San Diego to Sacramento and a waiting list of municipal clients that extended 18 months into the future. The transformed company occupied a restored warehouse in downtown Bakersfield, its solar-paneled roof and living wall exterior serving as advertisement for the environmental integration we brought to every project. The building itself had become a landmark, drawing architecture students and environmental engineers from universities throughout California who wanted to study how traditional industrial space could be converted into showcase of sustainable design principles. Inside the main conference room, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the urban garden that had replaced a concrete parking lot, I was reviewing quarterly reports that would have astounded Papa Miguel. Rodriguez Verde Development Corporation now employed over 200 people, maintained offices in 6 California cities, and had completed sustainable development projects worth more than $400 million. But the numbers that mattered most weren't financial. Our average project completion time was 23% faster than traditional construction. Client operational costs averaged 37% lower than comparable conventional buildings. Employee retention exceeded 90%, creating workplace stability that attracted the industry's most talented professionals. Tyler knocked on my office door carrying the familiar leather portfolio he'd inherited from Papa Miguel, along with 2 cups of café con leche from the employee kitchen that had become our informal meeting space. At 36, he'd grown into the kind of leader Papa Miguel had envisioned, combining inherited business instincts with hard-won appreciation for environmental innovation. "Elena, the Morrison family wants to meet with us about their next development project," he announced, settling into the chair across from my desk. Apparently, their Sacramento retail complex is performing so well above projections that they want to replicate the model throughout Northern California. The Morrison project had been one of our early successes, a shopping center renovation that combined traditional construction efficiency with cutting-edge environmental technology. Solar panels and energy-efficient lighting had reduced operational costs while improving tenant satisfaction. Rainwater collection and native landscaping had eliminated irrigation expenses while creating outdoor spaces that attracted additional customers. "How many properties are they considering?" I asked, already calculating the resources we'd need to manage multiple simultaneous projects without compromising quality standards that had become our competitive signature. 12 locations initially, with potential expansion to 25 if the first phase meets performance targets. Tyler's smile reflected the satisfaction of a businessman who'd learned that environmental responsibility could accelerate rather than limit growth. They specifically requested the Rodriguez Verde partnership model because they want construction expertise and environmental integration managed by a single organization. The partnership model had become our most valuable asset, eliminating the coordination challenges that plagued projects involving separate construction and environmental consulting companies. Clients preferred working with an integrated team that could deliver both traditional building quality and innovative sustainability features without the delays and cost overruns associated with multiple contractor relationships. "Tyler, do we have capacity for 12 simultaneous projects without hiring additional staff?" The question reflected lessons learned from earlier expansion attempts that had stretched our resources too thin, compromising project quality in ways that could have damaged our reputation permanently. Actually, I've been thinking about that. Rosa Martinez wants to open a Rodriguez Verde satellite office in San Francisco, and David Chen has been pushing for Los Angeles expansion. The Morrison contract could provide the project volume necessary to justify both new locations. Rosa and David are among our most experienced project managers, environmental engineers who joined Verde Valley Development during its early years and grown into senior leadership positions. Both understood that successful expansion required replicating our company culture and quality standards rather than simply hiring additional staff to handle increased volume. Papa Miguel always said that business growth should strengthen
Rather than dilute what makes a company special, I mused, remembering conversations where our grandfather had explained why Rodriguez Construction had remained deliberately small despite opportunities for rapid expansion. And he also said that companies that don't grow eventually get overtaken by competitors who do, Tyler replied, quoting another of Papa Miguel's business philosophies. The question is whether we can expand while maintaining the family business culture that makes Rodriguez Verde different from corporate construction firms. The balance between growth and identity had become increasingly important as our success attracted acquisition offers from national development companies who wanted to add sustainable construction capabilities to their service portfolios. The financial terms were tempting, but selling would have violated everything Papa Miguel had envisioned when he structured our inheritance to require family collaboration. Let's schedule the Morrison meeting for next week, I decided. But first, I want to visit the San Francisco and Los Angeles sites that Rosa and David have identified. Expansion decisions should be based on specific opportunities rather than abstract growth targets. Tyler agreed, pulling out his phone to coordinate travel arrangements that had become routine as Rodriguez Verde's reputation spread throughout California's commercial development community. What had started as Central Valley Regional Contractor had evolved into statewide sustainable development leader, with project requests from municipal governments and private developers who viewed environmental integration as competitive necessity rather than optional luxury. The drive to San Francisco took us through landscapes that told the story of California's environmental transformation. Solar panel arrays had replaced traditional agriculture in areas where water scarcity made farming unsustainable. Wind turbines dotted hillsides that once supported cattle ranching. Electric vehicle charging stations had become as common as gas stations along major highways. Elena, do you ever wonder what Papa Miguel would think about how far this has all come? Tyler asked as we passed a massive solar installation that powered 3 counties. When he wrote those letters, sustainable development was still considered niche market. Now it's standard practice. I think he'd be surprised by the speed of change, but not by the direction, I replied, remembering Papa Miguel's prescient understanding of environmental regulation trends and consumer preference shifts. He positioned us perfectly for a transformation that most people didn't see coming. Rosa's proposed San Francisco location occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse in the Mission District, its high ceilings and industrial aesthetics providing exactly the kind of workspace that attracted talented environmental engineers and architectural designers. The surrounding neighborhood buzzed with technology companies and creative enterprises that shared our commitment to innovation and environmental responsibility. The property owner is interested in sustainable retrofitting for the entire building, Rosa explained, as she showed us through spaces that could easily accommodate 50 employees. We could demonstrate our renovation capabilities while establishing San Francisco operations. The building retrofit opportunity represented exactly the kind of integrated project that showcased Rodriguez Verde's combined expertise. Traditional construction skills would handle structural improvements, while environmental engineering would add solar power, energy-efficient systems, and water conservation technology that reduced operational costs for all tenants. Rosa, what's your timeline for launching San Francisco operations? Tyler asked, examining architectural drawings that outlined the retrofit possibilities. 6 months for space preparation, 3 months for staff recruitment and training, then operational launch with the Morrison project as our inaugural contract, Rosa replied, with the precision that had made her invaluable to Rodriguez Verde's expansion planning. David's Los Angeles proposal was equally impressive, focusing on a downtown location that would position Rodriguez Verde to compete for the massive infrastructure projects that California's largest metropolitan area would require over the next decade. Urban density and environmental regulations made Los Angeles particularly suitable for the kind of sustainable development innovation we'd pioneered in the Central Valley.
The Los Angeles market demands capabilities we've never tested, David acknowledged as we toured potential office locations. High-rise construction, complex urban planning, integration with existing infrastructure that's decades old. It's a significant step up from Central Valley projects. But it's also where sustainable development can have the greatest environmental impact, I noted, considering the air quality and energy consumption challenges that made Los Angeles ideal for the kind of comprehensive environmental integration Rodriguez Verde had mastered. The expansion discussions continued through dinner at a restaurant that had become our informal planning location, its rooftop garden and solar-powered kitchen embodying the kind of environmental integration we brought to every project. Tyler and I had learned that our best strategic decisions emerged from relaxed conversations rather than formal conference room presentations. Elena, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you, Tyler said as our dinner conversation shifted from business planning to family updates. Sophia and I have been talking about the foundation Papa Miguel established for environmental education scholarships. The Scholarship Foundation had grown substantially over 5 years, using profits from Rodriguez Verde's success to support students pursuing environmental engineering, sustainable architecture, and renewable energy technology degrees. What had started as Papa Miguel's modest investment in future workforce development had become a substantial education program that attracted national attention. Sophia thinks the foundation should expand beyond individual scholarships to fund entire sustainable development programs at California universities, basically create degree programs that specifically train students for the kind of integrated work we do. The proposal was ambitious but logical. Rodriguez Verde's success had demonstrated that sustainable development required professionals who understood both traditional construction and environmental innovation. Most universities taught these subjects separately, producing graduates who excelled in one area but struggled with integrated projects. Tyler, that could address our biggest long-term challenge, I realized, thinking about the difficulty of finding
Employees who possessed both technical environmental expertise and practical construction knowledge. We've been training people internally, but university programs would produce graduates who arrive with integrated skill sets. Sophia has already approached UC Davis and Cal Poly about pilot programs, Tyler revealed. Both universities are interested, but they need funding commitments that extend beyond typical scholarship arrangements. The conversation continued past midnight as we outlined possibilities for educational programs that would ensure sustainable development expertise kept pace with industry demand. Papa Miguel's original vision had extended only to individual scholarships, but market evolution suggested that more comprehensive educational investment was necessary. 3 months later, Rodriguez Verde Development Corporation announced partnerships with 4 California universities to establish sustainable development degree programs that combined environmental science, construction management, and renewable energy technology into integrated curricula. The programs would produce graduates specifically trained for the kind of work our industry required, ensuring that expansion would be supported by qualified professionals rather than limited by workforce shortages. The university partnerships attracted media attention that positioned Rodriguez Verde as thought leader in sustainable development education as well as project implementation. Business journals featured articles about our educational investment strategy. Environmental organizations recognized our commitment to training the next generation of sustainability professionals. But the recognition that mattered most came during a ceremony at UC Davis, where the first Rodriguez Verde Sustainable Development Program graduated its inaugural class of 32 students. Tyler and I sat in an auditorium filled with families, celebrating young people who would carry forward Papa Miguel's vision of development that honored both economic success and environmental responsibility. These graduates represent Papa Miguel's greatest legacy, I whispered to Tyler as students crossed the stage to receive degrees in programs that hadn't existed 5 years earlier. He understood that lasting change requires educated people who can implement it. The graduation ceremony was followed by a reception where students presented projects they'd completed during their final semester. Solar panel installations that paid for themselves within 3 years, building materials made from recycled waste that performed better than traditional alternatives, urban planning models that reduced energy consumption while improving quality of life for residents. Miss Rodriguez, your grandfather's scholarship made it possible for me to complete this degree, said Jessica Chen, whose final project had designed affordable housing that met California's strictest environmental standards while remaining profitable for developers.
Jessica's comment reflected responses from most program graduates who viewed Rodriguez Verde as the ideal employer because we demonstrated that sustainable development could scale from individual projects to industry transformation. The educational programs had become recruitment pipeline that ensured our expansion would be supported by professionals who shared our values and understood our methods. The drive back to Bakersfield took us past construction sites where Rodriguez Verde projects were reshaping California's development landscape. Shopping centers that generated more energy than they consumed, office buildings that collected rainwater and processed waste on site, residential developments that provided affordable housing while reducing environmental impact. Elena, do you ever miss the simplicity of individual building projects? Tyler asked, as we passed a Rodriguez Verde residential development that housed 300 families in structures that required minimal energy for heating and cooling. Sometimes, but then I remember Papa Miguel's letter about building something that lasts beyond our own careers. I replied, watching children play in parks that had been designed to demonstrate native plant landscaping and natural water management. The company headquarters looked different when we returned, bustling with activity that would continue long after Tyler and I retired. Environmental engineers collaborated with construction supervisors on projects that spanned multiple states. Architectural designers worked with municipal planners to create developments that would serve communities for decades. Administrative staff managed contracts and relationships that extended our impact far beyond individual construction projects. In Papa Miguel's former study, now converted into a conference room where senior staff met weekly to coordinate company operations, the old safe remained open, its contents replaced by awards and recognition certificates that documented Rodriguez Verde's evolution from family business to industry leader. But the most meaningful display was a simple framed photograph. Papa Miguel as a young man, standing beside his first construction truck, with a handwritten note that read, "Build so well they can't look away." That philosophy had guided every decision Tyler and I made as we expanded Rodriguez Verde from regional contractor to statewide sustainable development corporation. Quality work that exceeded client expectations, environmental integration that provided measurable benefits, employee treatment that attracted talented professionals who shared our commitment to excellence. The quarterly board meeting that concluded our busiest year in company history took place in the conference room where Tyler and I had first shaken hands 5 years earlier. Board members included family representatives, senior employees, university partners, and community leaders who helped guide Rodriguez Verde's continued growth while preserving the values Papa Miguel had embedded in our corporate culture. Rodriguez Verde Development Corporation now employs 430 people across 7 California offices, reported Sarah Kim, our chief financial officer, whose presentation detailed financial performance that exceeded our most optimistic projections. Revenue for this fiscal year reached $620 million, with profit margins that remain above industry averages. But the numbers that generated the most satisfaction weren't financial. Environmental impact assessments showed that Rodriguez Verde projects had reduced California's commercial building energy consumption by measurable amounts.
Satisfaction surveys indicated retention rates that made us employer of choice in sustainable development. Client feedback consistently rated our work as exceeding expectations for both quality and environmental performance. Papa Miguel would be amazed by what you've built together, observed Aunt Carmen, now serving as board member representing family interests in company governance. He dreamed of a business that would honor both family traditions and environmental responsibility, but I don't think he imagined it could grow this large while staying true to those values. The board meeting concluded with approval for international expansion, specifically projects in Mexico and Central America, where Rodriguez Verde's Spanish language capabilities and family business culture provided competitive advantages that larger corporations couldn't replicate. Papa Miguel's emphasis on family relationships and cultural understanding had created assets that became more valuable as we expanded into markets where personal trust remained essential for business success. Standing on the rooftop garden that crowned our headquarters building, Tyler and I watched the sunset over Bakersfield's skyline, now dotted with solar installations and green buildings that represented the environmental transformation we'd helped lead. The Central Valley that had once seemed backwards and environmentally destructive had become a showcase for sustainable development that attracted visitors from around the world. "Elena, I need to tell you something I should have said years ago,"
Tyler began, his voice carrying the weight of delayed recognition. "When Papa Miguel excluded you from the will reading, I thought it confirmed my belief that you'd abandoned the family by moving to Oregon. I was wrong about everything. You didn't abandon us, you prepared for our future." The apology wasn't necessary after 5 years of successful collaboration, but it completed a process of family healing that had begun the day we discovered Papa Miguel's hidden inheritance. Tyler's acknowledgement represented more than personal growth. It validated Papa Miguel's faith that family relationships could evolve to support shared purposes rather than compete for limited resources. "Tyler, Papa Miguel designed that entire situation to teach all of us lessons we needed to learn," I replied, remembering the birthday combination that had unlocked more than a safe. "You learned that environmental responsibility was competitive necessity, not idealistic luxury. I learned that family support was available when I stopped expecting rejection and started demonstrating value." The conversation continued as streetlights illuminated the city below, where thousands of people lived and worked in buildings that Rodriguez Verde had constructed according to principles Papa Miguel had envisioned but never lived to see implemented. Our grandfather's legacy wasn't just financial inheritance or business success. It was transformation of how development happened, proof that economic growth and environmental protection were complementary rather than competing values. The final element of Papa Miguel's plan revealed itself during our 10th anniversary celebration, held in the garden behind the house on Elm Street, where 3 generations of Rodriguez family members gathered to honor the man whose vision had reshaped both our relationships and our industry. Tyler's children played alongside Sophia's sons in the same spaces where Papa Miguel had taught us to measure twice and cut once. "Papa Miguel left us more than money or business opportunities," I said during the dinner toast that concluded our anniversary celebration. "He left us understanding that true inheritance consists of values, vision, and the courage to build something meaningful with the resources we're given." The applause that followed wasn't just family politeness. It was recognition that Papa Miguel's birthday gift, the combination that unlocked his safe, had ultimately unlocked potential none of us had recognized until circumstances forced us to see ourselves and each other differently. Rodriguez Verde Development Corporation continued growing, but the foundation remained Papa Miguel's belief that business success should serve purposes larger than profit. Environmental responsibility that benefited communities, educational investment that prepared future generations, family relationships that supported rather than competed with individual achievement. The secret safe had been empty for years, its contents transformed into company achievements and family reconciliation that exceeded Papa Miguel's most ambitious expectations. But the birthday code remained meaningful, reminding Tyler and me that some gifts require time to fully appreciate, that the best inheritance is opportunity to build something worthy of the sacrifice that made it possible. Papa Miguel's final lesson had proven itself through a decade of application. Sustainable development wasn't just about environmental protection or business success, but about creating lasting value that served multiple generations. The birthday combination had unlocked more than hidden wealth. It had revealed the pathway to transformation that honored the past while building the future. The phone call that would forever change how I understood Papa Miguel's master plan came on a Tuesday morning, 15 years after I'd first entered that birthday combination into his old safe. I was reviewing architectural blueprints for our latest project, a carbon-neutral university campus in Northern California, when my assistant knocked on my office door with an expression that suggested something extraordinary had just occurred. "Elena, there's a gentleman here from Mexico City who says he has information about your grandfather that you need to hear immediately,"
she announced, her voice carrying the careful neutrality she used when unsure how to categorize unusual situations. The visitor was a distinguished man in his 70s, wearing an expensive but understated suit that suggested wealth without ostentation. His silver hair was carefully styled, and his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected millions of dollars and thousands of lives. Ms. Rodriguez, I am Eduardo Hernandez, chairman of Construcciones Hernandez, Mexico's largest sustainable development corporation. He introduced himself with a formal handshake that somehow felt familiar despite our never having met.
Hernandez was familiar from industry publications covering Latin American sustainable development, but I had no idea why their chairman would travel internationally to discuss Papa Miguel. Your grandfather and I were business partners for the final 15 years of his life, Eduardo continued, his accent suggesting education at prestigious international institutions. Miguel invested heavily in our Mexican operations, providing capital that allowed Construcciones Hernandez to become the leading sustainable development company throughout Central and South America. The revelation hit like an earthquake, reshaping everything I thought I understood about Papa Miguel's hidden investments and international business sophistication. The documents Eduardo spread across my desk showed partnership agreements, investment transfers, and profit-sharing arrangements that totaled hundreds of millions of dollars over 2 decades. Miguel never told his family about our partnership because he wanted to ensure that his investments were managed by people who shared his vision rather than simply inherited his wealth, Eduardo explained, scanning my face for reactions to information that was recontextualizing my grandfather's legacy in ways I couldn't have imagined. But why are you revealing this now? I asked, struggling to process the magnitude of what Papa Miguel had apparently been building while maintaining the image of a small-town Central Valley contractor. Eduardo smiled with the satisfaction of someone about to deliver news that would transform someone's understanding of their place in the world. Because Miguel's partnership agreement included specific instructions that activated 15 years after his death. Today marks that anniversary, and certain provisions of our contract now require implementation. He pulled out a document that bore Papa Miguel's signature alongside Eduardo's, dated exactly 1 year before my grandfather's death. The contract outlined profit-sharing arrangements that had been accumulating interest in Mexican banks for 15 years, waiting for conditions that Papa Miguel had anticipated with characteristic precision. Your grandfather's share of Construcciones Hernandez profits over the past 15 years amounts to approximately $240 million, Eduardo announced with the casual tone of someone accustomed to discussing vast sums of money. The partnership agreement specifies that these accumulated profits transfer to his designated heir on the 15th anniversary of his death, provided that heir has demonstrated successful implementation of sustainable development principles. $240 million. The number seemed too large to represent actual money, more like abstract concept than tangible resource. But the bank statements Eduardo provided showed accounts in Mexico City and Geneva that contained exactly the amounts he'd described, all documented with the meticulous record-keeping that had characterized every aspect of Papa Miguel's business planning. Eduardo, how did Papa Miguel connect with Construcciones Hernandez initially? I asked, trying to understand how a Central Valley contractor had developed international business relationships without anyone in his family being aware of such activities. Miguel approached us 22 years ago with a proposal for sustainable development joint ventures that combined his California market knowledge with our Latin American construction capabilities. He had researched our company extensively and understood that environmental regulation trends in the United States would eventually spread throughout North America. The partnership had begun with small projects along the California-Mexico border, gradually expanding as Papa Miguel's investments provided capital for Construcciones Hernandez to acquire sustainable technology and environmental expertise. What had started as cross-border collaboration
had evolved into comprehensive business relationship that spanned multiple countries and industries. Your grandfather was extraordinarily prescient about sustainable development market evolution. When we started working together, environmental considerations were an optional luxury in Mexican construction. Miguel convinced us that companies which develop sustainable capabilities early would dominate markets as environmental regulations became mandatory. The documents Eduardo had brought detailed Papa Miguel's strategic thinking with precision that would have impressed business school professors. Market analysis showing environmental regulation trends throughout Latin America, investment strategies that positioned Construcciones Hernandez to benefit from government incentives for sustainable development, technology acquisition plans that built competitive advantages before competitors recognized market shifts. But Miguel's most valuable contribution wasn't financial capital, Eduardo observed. It was his understanding that sustainable development required cultural change, not just technical innovation. He helped us develop employee training programs, community outreach initiatives, and client education strategies that made environmental responsibility profitable rather than burdensome. Papa Miguel had essentially exported the philosophy that had guided Rodriguez Verde Development Corporation's success, adapting it for different cultural contexts and regulatory environments throughout Mexico and Central America. The approach that had transformed Central Valley construction had been simultaneously reshaping Latin American development practices through partnerships no one in our family had known existed. Eduardo, why did Papa Miguel keep these international partnerships secret from his family? The question had been building since Eduardo's first revelations, challenging everything I thought I understood about my grandfather's relationship with family business transparency. Because he wanted his family inheritance decisions to be based on character and capability rather than expectations of international wealth, Eduardo replied, echoing themes I recognized from Papa Miguel's letters about the birthday combination and Verde Valley Development's hidden backing. Papa Miguel had apparently been testing not just our reactions to domestic inheritance arrangements, but our ability to succeed with substantial resources before revealing the full scope of what he'd been building internationally. The $83 million that had seemed so overwhelming 15 years ago represented only the beginning of what he'd accumulated through strategic partnerships and patient investment.
Construcciones Hernandez and Rodriguez Verde Development Corporation to collaborate on projects throughout North and Central America. Eduardo continued, outlining expansion opportunities that would require resources and expertise neither company possessed independently. The proposed collaboration would position Rodriguez Verde to compete for massive infrastructure projects that governments and private developers were planning throughout the Americas. Sustainable city developments in Costa Rica, renewable energy installations across Mexico, commercial developments in Panama that would serve as models for environmental integration throughout Central America. Your grandfather believed that sustainable development's ultimate success required cooperation between companies that shared environmental values, rather than competition between organizations focused purely on profit, Eduardo explained, describing a vision of international business collaboration that transcended traditional corporate boundaries. The conversation continued for 3 hours as Eduardo outlined specific projects where Construcciones Hernandez and Rodriguez Verde could combine resources and expertise to achieve results neither company could accomplish alone. The scale was breathtaking, involving billions of dollars in development projects that could reshape environmental standards throughout multiple countries. Elena, I need to ask you directly, Eduardo said as our meeting approached its conclusion. Are you prepared to manage international business operations that will require you to spend significant time in Mexico, Central America, and potentially South America? The question forced me to confront possibilities I'd never considered during 15 years of focusing on California's sustainable development. International expansion would require learning new languages, understanding different cultural contexts, and navigating regulatory environments that varied significantly between countries. Eduardo, can I ask you to give me 1 week to discuss this with Tyler and our board of directors? I replied, recognizing that decisions of this magnitude required consultation with people who'd helped build Rodriguez Verde's current success. Of course, Miguel always emphasized that important decisions required careful consideration rather than immediate responses. Eduardo agreed, gathering documents that had revealed the existence of business relationships and accumulated wealth that dwarfed anything our family had imagined possible. The week that followed was filled with conversations that reshaped how Tyler and I understood both Papa Miguel's legacy and Rodriguez Verde's potential future. Board meetings where financial advisors calculated the implications of sudden wealth increases. Strategy sessions where senior staff debated whether international expansion aligned with our company's values and capabilities. Elena, this changes everything about what's possible for Rodriguez Verde, Tyler observed during one of our evening planning discussions. With Construcciones Hernández's resources and relationships, we could implement sustainable development projects that influence environmental standards throughout the Americas. But it also means accepting responsibility for business operations on a scale we've never managed, I cautioned, remembering Papa Miguel's warnings about growth that outpaced organizational capability to maintain quality and values. The decision ultimately came down to a fundamental question about Rodriguez Verde's mission and Papa Miguel's intentions. Had he built international partnerships because he wanted his family business to become a multinational corporation, or because he believed sustainable development required global cooperation to achieve meaningful environmental impact? Tyler and I spent hours reading Papa Miguel's correspondence with Eduardo, documents that revealed our grandfather's thinking about sustainable development's role in addressing climate change, economic inequality, and international cooperation challenges that transcended individual countries or companies. Miguel often said that environmental problems don't respect national boundaries, so environmental solutions shouldn't be limited by corporate boundaries either, one of Papa Miguel's letters had stated, describing his vision of business partnerships that prioritized planetary well-being over profit maximization. The letter that ultimately decided our response was addressed to Elena and Tyler, inheritors of tomorrow's possibilities. Papa Miguel had anticipated Construcciones Hernández partnership revelations would force us to choose between comfortable regional success and challenging international responsibility. By now you understand that sustainable development isn't just about building better buildings or using renewable energy. It's about proving that business success and environmental responsibility can coexist on a scale large enough to influence how development happens globally. His final paragraph crystallized the choice we faced. You can remain successful California contractors who happen to care about the environment, or you can become leaders of an international movement that proves sustainable development is both profitable and essential for humanity's future. The decision required unanimous board approval, extensive legal consultation, and financial planning that addressed currency fluctuations, international tax implications, and regulatory compliance across multiple countries. But the fundamental choice was philosophical rather than practical, whether Rodriguez Verde would accept the opportunity and responsibility that Papa Miguel had spent decades positioning us to embrace. 6 months after Eduardo's visit, Rodriguez Verde Development Corporation announced its merger with Construcciones Hernández, creating Rodriguez Verde Hernández International, the largest sustainable development company in the Western Hemisphere. The announcement attracted attention from business publications, environmental organizations, and government agencies interested in our planned projects throughout the Americas. The merger celebration took place in Mexico City,
where 3 generations of the Rodriguez and Hernandez families gathered to honor Miguel Rodriguez and Eduardo's father, who had originally founded Construcciones Hernandez, with similar values about business responsibility and environmental stewardship. Papa Miguel's vision extended far beyond what any of us imagined, I said during the dinner toast that concluded our merger celebration. He understood that sustainable development success required thinking globally while acting locally, building relationships that transcended borders while honoring the uniqueness of each location,
communities where we work. The applause that followed reflected recognition that Papa Miguel's birthday gift had ultimately unlocked opportunities to influence environmental development throughout multiple countries and cultures. The combination that had opened his safe had revealed not just hidden wealth, but access to international relationships and accumulated resources that could reshape how development happened across continents. Rodriguez Verde Hernandez International's first major project was a sustainable city development in Costa Rica that would house 50,000 residents while generating more renewable energy than it consumed. The project combined Rodriguez Verde's environmental expertise with Construcciones Hernandez's construction capabilities and local knowledge, creating a model for international collaboration in sustainable development. Standing in Papa Miguel's original study, now preserved as a conference room where our international leadership team met quarterly, I often reflected on the journey that had begun with a birthday combination and evolved into multinational corporation committed to proving that environmental responsibility and business success were inseparable values. The old safe remained open, its contents now replaced by flags from countries where Rodriguez Verde Hernandez maintained offices and photographs from projects that demonstrated sustainable development's potential to address global challenges while generating profits that supported continued expansion and innovation. Papa Miguel's final lesson had proven itself through 2 decades of application. True inheritance isn't about receiving what previous generations built, but about using their foundation to construct something larger and more meaningful than they could have accomplished alone. The birthday code had unlocked more than money. It had revealed access to possibilities that required courage, vision, and commitment to values larger than individual success. The secret safe had been empty for years, but its legacy continued expanding as Rodriguez Verde Hernandez International proved that businesses built on family values and environmental principles could succeed globally while honoring the communities they served and the planet they shared. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.